other than that, I was saying that we're going to continue with security. It is a little bit of a dry subject, but it is also one of those things where it will set you apart, because a lot of HCM consultant folks shy away from security, thinking that it is really tough or is something that not exciting enough for them, or is too complicated for them, and it really is not. I may not know everything in Workday security, but I know enough to have successfully been maintaining security and adding security groups and giving permissions as required, and that's what I'm going to teach you. And it is not complicated. As we were talking about yesterday, it's just a matter of knowing where things are and who needs access and how to set up that access. And we'll go through some examples today, and I think maybe even on whenever we have the next session as well. And security is very much connected to business processes, because every business process, it needs a group, because the steps of the business process are sent to the group that's part of that step. So you really cannot separate security from business processes. So part of today's lecture is going to be introduction to business processes, and see how do we modify groups for a particular business process. So bear with me, it is not a difficult topic, and it will set you apart from other people who think it is a difficult topic. All right, so I'm going to start with functional areas, and I'm going to go into one slide I have for it. Remember functional areas. Okay, so let me just start from this slide at the top. Workday groups solutions into distinct functional areas. Each functional area is divided into domains and business processes. And a domain is a predefined set of related securable items. So the reports, the task, instance sets, report fields, and data sources. So when you look up a domain, it will tell you everything, all of the data or sections that are part of that domain. And in order to find out which domain you're in, you look at the functional area. So keep this in mind. Functional areas at the top, is it is the categories such as staffing, such as recruiting, and then underneath that functional area is domains and business processes. Okay. So example, HCM includes succession planning functional area comprising of a number of domains and business processes related to talent management. So under the Workday HCM product, this is an example of a functional area called succession planning, which has a number of domains and business processes that are related to talent management. Similarly, we created supervisory org, we created a location, we created organizations. So there is a domain for organizations, and because we had access to that domain, we were able to create a supervisory org, and we were able to create a location, and we were able to create a cost center. Okay. You cannot change the securable items comprising a domain. Okay. So the things that are within domain, you cannot change them, but you can control access to a domain through its domain security policy, and you can use the domain security policy to link a domain with any Workday security group that should have access. Okay. And I know we covered all of this, but this deserves repeating. A business process is a set of configurable steps used to complete a larger overall task, such as hiring an employee. So there was a hiring business process. And you control access to the business process through its business process security policy. And the policy defines the security groups that have access to the business process. So things in the business process are initiating the business process, approvals, approval steps, and any policy restrictions. So now I'm going to go into the demo, and we're going to look at different functional areas. So I'm not in edit mode. That's why I cannot change, I cannot enable or disable a domain. So this tenant has all of the functional areas that would say enabled yes. Those functional areas are enabled within this tenant. So let's look at them. So there's 70 of the 88 functional areas are enabled. And I'm going to look at staffing, for example. So let me filter on that. So staffing functional area is hire, transfer, promote, terminate, and report on employees. So basically all of the HR type data, including contract, transfers, ending contract, and reporting on contingent workers, create and edit positions, track work location, view positions, staffing and headcount summary reports, and manage employees in multiple jobs, including international assignments, retirees, and reports on staffing versus approved budget, and setting up of worker categories. So if someone needs access to any of these things, and depending on which particular item that they need access to, these domains that are listed in this column would be the one that will provide them access to that. And then these would be the business processes that are part of this domain. Now, we actually created supervisory org, right? But you don't see supervisory org mentioned anywhere in here. So in order to create the supervisory org, we actually needed access to a domain and a business process in a different functional area. So we'll look at that in a second. So there's definitely multiple functional areas that we need to be aware of. If I click on more, it will show me all of the different domains that are listed here. And all of the domains that start with self-service, so self-service employment data, this is going to manage employees' visibility to their own employment data. So if you don't want the employee themselves, himself or herself, not to see a particular section of their employment data, you would remove the self-service employee, you would remove the employee group from the self-service employment data domain. And then everything that's under self-service is also under worker data as well. So let me scroll down to worker data. So here's worker data, active and terminated workers, and worker data, staffing information, worker data, headcount reports, or worker data, employment data. So when we say worker data, this is the way it differentiates from the self-service heading. Is self-service is the visibility to the employee himself or herself, but worker data is for anybody who's any group that's part of this domain to have access to the workers data. So HR partners access to the employment data, or the manager roles access to the employment data is going to be maintained through this domain. There is the domain for job details. So things you need to put security on or add or remove different sections about the job, you'll do that from here. There's worker data organization, so visibility into which cost center a employee is in, or other organizations. So the visibility into that is part of this domain. And general information about the worker. And a lot of it is going to take, you actually have to look into that domain and see what's included in it, and then modify it accordingly. But the names provide a good clue of what's underneath each of these domains, and then you could also search by a particular action to find out which domain you need to modify the permissions in. And as far as business processes within staffing, so the most common one is change job business process. So every company has some version of this. So it's good to know the steps within that change job business process. Closing a position, there should also be create position, edit position restrictions, move to a new manager. This is also a good business process to be aware of. And then move workers. Remember when we created a supervisory org and we moved workers from one supervisory org to another, we used one of these business processes. And when we moved them, I don't know if there was a notification that was part of this business process. Generally, because you did a move on the back end, you need to make other people aware that you made that change. So you want to make sure that the business processes have a notification set up, and we will go through how to set that up as well. Title change business process is here, and the termination business process is here as well. A couple other ones which are, typically they're available, but I haven't, people don't really use them that much in the States. Things related to retirement status. Probation period is used for international employees. And so just go ahead and explore. And remember, in order to view these business processes, you start with the acronym BP in the search bar, and then the name of that process. So let me go down to the title change business process, and we're going to look at the business process policy for it. All right, so which groups have the ability to change, initiate a business a title change? So when I went to the business process security policy, under view, it says that under the initiating action for change business title, these are the security groups that could do that. So interestingly, we have HR partner, we have implementer, and we have management chain as well as manager. So these folks could initiate that change. So we were looking at the question is, and it's part of the lab, is identify which groups have the ability to initiate a title change under this business process. So you look under initiating actions, and these are the groups that have the ability to do that. And I also want to go to the functional area of organization roles. So in this functional area, it has all of the permissions which are for the domains for organization and roles. So the description for this one is set up and administer organizations. So this is what gave us the ability to create a supervisory org, or create a cost center, or create a location. and create and manage reorg events and set up organization roles and membership roles. So when we assigned a role, it's because we had access based on the group that we had, which was part of these domains and these business processes. So if we go to assign roles, this particular business process, and let me go there. These are the groups that have access to assigning roles to a worker. Now, if your company is implementing a new product and you need to add the roles, assign roles step to a new group. So, for example, if you add recruiting as a functional area and you're going to implement recruiting, and now recruiter needs to be able to assign roles. They would do that because, like, if you want to assign roles on a requisition, like who's going to be the primary recruiter for that particular requisition, and it is the recruiter who is creating that requisition, and there is a assigning role step. So you may have to add the recruiter as a security group within this initiating step. You come over here, you search for the required security group. You select it, and then you click OK. You also want to check, in addition to initiating action, if there's any other areas that you need to add that security group to. So this allows you to assign roles to a worker, but this is the one that allows you to assign roles to a position. And you know, even though we're not going to go through every single section, and even in the formal Workday training, we don't go through every single section, but it's up to us to look at what these sections are labeled and go through them. For example, this one says assign roles, add, remove. So in yesterday, when we give permissions to one user based on another user's name, that was because that group that we had was part of this group that allowed us to add, remove roles. So there's a lot of actions up here under each business process. And as we get to work with a particular business process, and we say, okay, yeah, I need to make sure that I add that person under view all or under view completed only. So this one, view all, says who can do actions on an entire business process, or view completed only, or view approve. If those people who have ability under actions and approve, these could be part of the approval step, or who could cancel a particular business process, so on, and those who could rescind it. So that's where you manage the access to a particular business process steps. And so we could navigate to the domain from the functional area, or you could also type view domains here. So I'm going to look up the domain for locations. So just to reiterate, when I was looking at the the previous example, which was a business process, which was actions you could do on a business process. And remember, business processes are the action steps, but domains are the visibility to the items on the UI, or access to particular reports for that domain. So now I'm viewing a domain called location. So the description of this domain is, it provides access to maintain and view locations, including access to view the location directory, including web services. Okay. And under the Actions tab and under Domain, you could edit security policy permissions. So this is where you change who needs, if someone needs the ability to create or modify a location, you want to make sure that group is here, updated under the security policy. That's one way to get to it. You could also get to it from this magnifying glass. Edit permissions. To enable this domain, so just because a functional area is enabled, it does not mean all of the domains underneath that would be enabled. So in order to enable the particular domain, you need to come to this magnifying glass and then enable or disable a domain from here. So right now, because this domain is already enabled, we only see the choice to disable. But if this was not enabled, then there will be an enable link here, and you could click on that to enable this domain. And once you enable the domain, then you could edit the permissions on it. This also tells us which custom objects are part of this domain and which data sources. So when we're creating reports, and we need to create a report on locations, and this would be the data source we need. And we want to make sure that the person who's going to be running the report, in order for them to have access to the locations, that employee who needs access to it must be in a group, and that group must be one of the groups that's defined under the permissions for this domain. So I'll click on that in just a second. So let me just go through. There's instance sets. Report fields is probably more of our interest. In order for you to know which reports are part of this domain, which report fields and tasks. So create location task. So creating a location is not a business process, because you just go to the create location task and you create it, and there's no review step and there's no approval step. So that's why this is under tasks. And then web services, if you need to create locations via integration or modify data of a location via web services, and these are the web services that are managed through this domain. So who has access to do that currently? We could go to Actions, Domain, and Edit Security Policy. Okay. So it tells us currently that under the report and task permissions, it says 2 items because we have 2 rows over here. And these groups, Finance Administrator, HR Admin, Implementer, and Organization Administrator, they have ability to view or modify locations. And if they have ability to modify locations, they could also create locations. Here, these groups, like all the employees have ability to view locations, but all employees cannot create a location or edit that data. And then integration permissions are maintained in the integrations permissions section. So if you create an integration system user, like here's an example of supplier integration system for get functionality, so that they could pull the data regarding locations, and it works the same way. It has a different section. And if you create another integration system user and they just need get functionality, you could add that user here. And if they need to be able to modify or create, then you could add, you could add them to the top group. So there's some questions about how do you know which groups have access, or how do you add access? If for some bizarre reason you need, your recruiters to be able to create locations, because there's something called interview locations, and you might have like different offices that you want to set up as a location, so they show up for setting up an interview in, and you need to give access to the recruiting or recruiting operations folks or recruiting coordinators. And if that group is set up, then you would add them, via this functionality. You could search it up and then add them to this security. I mean, you would add that security group to this domain, click OK. But remember this warning. It says you must activate your security policy for this to take into effect. And this is true for when we make changes to the business process security policy or to the domain security policy. You must activate that. Okay. So how do you know who has, or if you want to know who has permissions to view something? So for example, if I want to know who has access to view workers' emergency contacts, how would I do that? So there's a report called View Security or Securable Item. So here you could put in name of a task or a report or a business process, and then it will tell you, what's the security configuration behind that. So, if we have a scenario that says, hey, we want to know who has access to emergency contacts, because by default, managers do not have access to their employees' emergency contacts, and we want to add that group to it. Or you want to do the reverse. You no longer want managers to have access to employees' contacts, employees' emergency contacts. So under the securable item, I'm going to put in emergency contacts. Now, all of the tasks and reports that are related to emergency contacts showed up. So we want the emergency contacts report field, which is this one. And so here, emergency contacts report field, the related business object is emergency contact. The business object is worker, and view security will tell us that, hey, the domain person data emergency contact is currently secured to all of these folks. So HR administrators, HR executives, HR partners. So if anyone who belongs to any of these groups go to the worker's profile, they would be able to see the contact information. Or they will be able to see the emergency contact information for that worker. And yesterday, I also added the manager to the emergency contacts. So now even if you're not in HR, but you're a manager, you could see the emergency contacts of a worker. So let me go in as a manager and to demonstrate that, and then we'll remove manager's access. And then we'll see that the manager no longer has access to the emergency contacts. So I'm going to log into incognito mode as one of the managers. And here I'm going to go in as Jake. So Jake Lee. Make sure you can see my screen that has Jake Lee on it. So I'm going to look up his team by going to his profile and looking up his team. So he is in the supervisory, he is the manager of the supervisory org, which are direct reports to him. And because I added manager as a group that has access to emergency contacts, he should be able to click on any of these folks and see their emergency contact. So I'm going to click on Nobu and then go to contact, and you can see the emergency contacts. Okay. Now I'm going to go to people below Nobu, and Jake is not going to be their direct manager, and he should not be able to see the emergency contacts. Nobu does not have employees underneath him, but Yomiko does. So let me go there. So I'm going to pick someone 2 levels down. Okay. So now I went to Keith's contact info, and we don't see the emergency contacts tab. So this could be problematic. Like, what if someone above Jake, they need to see that as well. So in order to give them quick access to the contacts, why don't we add the management chain to have access to the emergency contacts? So that means anybody in that management chain should be able to see the emergency contacts for the employees that they manage. Now we are off script. I don't know if management chain is allowed as one of these permitted security groups, but let's try that. Because typically our actually homework assignment calls for adding manager here. And, so I was going to remove manager and then add it back in. But let's try a little bit more than that. Let's see if we could add management chain. Can we give the management chain or the management hierarchy permission to the emergency contacts? So I'm going to go to that domain, and I'm going to say edit security policy permissions. And if I could add management chain here as a group, then they should be able to see it if it's available. If it's not available, then we will not be able to do it. So manage, it is available. So I'm going to select management chain. So I'm going to click. I was going to click OK, but I don't see it got. Oh yeah, here it is. And I'm going to actually click on the related actions to see more information about. I wanted to know what is management chain, just like you asked. And there is usually some kind of description, especially if it's a Workday delivered group. So first of all, it says that this is a role-based security group constrained. That means it's limited to the organizations that they manage. So they don't have visibility across everyone. So it's a constrained group. It's the security group management chain. The role that it uses is manager and access to current orgs and all subordinates, access to multiple job workers, and comment says view members of assigned supervisory org and subordinates, and approval authority for HCM expense and procurement. So anybody who's in the management chain has the visibility to see the members of the supervisory orgs and the subordinates and any kind of expense related authority. So that's what they have by default. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and refresh my screen as Jake. And should I be able to see Jake's information, Jake's emergency contact? Should I be able to see it?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to click on refresh, and I still can't. And so I have to figure out, hey, what happened? The permissions enabled. I clicked on OK. Oh, and especially if you're working in a larger organization with multiple Workday consultants, you always want to see what's pending, because maybe someone else had made any changes, and you don't want to activate their changes without checking with them first. Okay, so activate pending security policy changes. So here, we should put a description of the changes that we did. So for tracking or audit purposes, because auditors, they do want a report of, hey, when did you make this change, and did you have permissions to make this change? So if you have some type of an email or some type of help desk ticket number, it's probably best to put that information here. So per ticket number, updated security policy for emergency contacts, added manager. I added manager before this class, so right now I'm going to say added manager and management chain to view emergency contacts.
By doing this step, Ramesh, so you're saying that if there are any other pending security policy changes in the tenant, they will all get updated or activated?
Yeah, they will all get activated.
So we don't really have any control on which policy change to activate.
There is a report that I'll mention in the that I mentioned in my lecture notes, which will be posted. That will tell you, which are all the pending policy changes which will get activated. So before you activate it, you could run that report, see what's going to be activated. So here we had only changed emergency contacts, right? But we see there's a lot of stuff here that got activated. Someone was modifying the worker data to me, and based on my activation, all of these, whether or not that person wanted these activated right now or he was just experimenting, but they're all, once I click confirm, all of these are going to get activated, and if there's any business process. So here's someone must have made some changes to the hire business process, and we're going to activate them also. So in real life, always check with your colleagues and run the report to see, what else is being impacted by what I'm doing. Okay, so now I'm gonna go back to Jake. You should be able to see my screen with Jake and Keith Barnes on it, and I'm gonna refresh my page. Okay. So now I can see emergency contacts for Keith. So it's as simple as that. 99% of problems are just going to be, hey, we need to enable a particular section, or we need to remove a certain visibility from a particular security group. And the toughest part is going to be, where do you go to, where do you go to actually find that information? And that actually just comes from exploring the functional area, exploring the domains, and see what's in them. maybe there is a list of all the items that are within domains somewhere. But one, maybe I didn't look for it hard enough, or I just kind of look for the domain and domain name, and just go by the description and try to find it. Or you use the view security for secureable item. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. So once again, this report was helpful in finding out which domain I needed to modify for security policies. So it's view security or secureable item. And it says secureable item. So you could put a report name, business process, things of that nature. If you just put a particular field, it may not return anything because the field may not, because you cannot secure just that particular field. Now, I mean, there are many fields that are secured at the field level, but most are not. So if you happen to put in a particular field, you may not get any data. It's asking for the secureable item, and secureable item means things you could put security around it. And most of the security is based on domains and the business objects within that particular domain. So it's not at the field level. Okay. So we walked through the scenario of, you had a requirement and you needed to change who could see the emergency contacts. So we covered that. That's related to one of the tasks that you have in the lab. Now let's do something similar to edit locations. So what if I want to find out, someone, say there's a scenario and someone in facilities wants to be able to add locations, or you have a new group that's going to be manage all of the locations. So, or they just need to modify a location, and edit location is a task. And I have no idea, which domain has the ability to edit location. So I could type location, but that is not a task. So how do I find out if something is a task? If I type that, like edit location, and then it says, actually edit location report. So this tells me that this is a report, edit location usage is a task, and edit location name is a task. So right here in this little gray text, it'll tell you what type of item it is, whether it's a report or a task. So I'm going to put edit location here. So all of the tasks that are related to that showed up, as well as the if there was any reports, they should be here as well. So edit location, there's a delivered report. But because it's set up as a task, like you don't actually run that report as the normal report. So that's why it's showing up in the task area. So here I want to see who has the ability to edit the primary location task. So I have to find the task that I'm looking for. Edit primary location. Maybe I could filter on it. Now, in the real world, especially when we're learning, how do we know exactly which task to go after? it's going to be a matter of trial and error. You're going to modify a task, you're going to modify the security, and you're going to see, okay, it still has not, I'm not getting the results. So maybe that's in a different task. Even within compensation, because there's like 5 different compensation, child domains, I still have trouble, like, okay, identifying exactly which child domain will give me access to modify the security. And you try it once or twice, and then you get to the exact one that you're looking for. And with experience, you start creating your own list. Okay, these are the common domains, and these are these are the fields and which domains they have. And then it makes it a little bit easier. Like, I have the list of compensation domains and which ones I need to modify, because that's one of the things that we change permissions for or grant permissions. But yeah, initially it's going to be trial and error. Okay, so I want to see who has the ability to edit the primary location. So I go under View Security, and it tells me that this is managed by the domain security policy of supervisory org, which is under the functional area of organization and roles. And these are the security groups. And then for me, if I need to modify these or add to it, remember, I go to the domain and domain security policy. And then you modify it here based on view or modify. Integration permissions here, click OK. Make sure you activate your pending security policy changes before you modify that. Check with your colleagues in the real world, and then activate those